A young man and his girlfriend enter the apartment they share. She tosses her keys on the entryway table as the man checks the time on his phone. He reminds the young woman that they will need to leave soon if they don't want to miss the movie they have purchased tickets for. The woman agrees, but she wants to take a quick shower before they leave. As she goes to freshen up, the man sits down at his computer to get in a quick round or two of his favorite online squad-based first-person shooter. He puts on his headset and jumps into a game. Before he knows it, he's just finished his third round. He checks the time on his phone again and realizes that they were running late. He takes off his headphones and is confused when he hears what sounds like the shower still running. He gets up and goes to the bathroom door and listens. The shower is definitely still on. The man knocks on the door and asks if everything is all right. He waits a moment, but there's no response. He knocks again, and still nothing. She doesn't usually take showers this long, and he immediately worries that she might have passed out or, well, he doesn't even want to think about it. "I'm coming in, okay?" he announces as he opens the door to check on her. The man immediately notices how steamy the room is. The hot water must have been running for a while, and he's worried she really did pass out from the heat. "What's going on? Are you okay?" he asks, and when there's no response again, he pulls open the shower curtain to find nothing. Just an empty tub. There's no sign of his girlfriend anywhere. The man is beyond confused. He turns off the water and goes to the bedroom, but she isn't in there either. He runs to the front door, but it's still locked, and her keys are sitting on the table. He unlocks the door and sticks his head out into the hallway anyway, but nothing is out there. What is going on? He checks the bedroom again, then the bathroom, but she hasn't suddenly reappeared in either. He's in complete shock, unsure of what could be happening. He sits down on the toilet and puts his head in his hands. His head is spinning as it feels like the world is suddenly falling down all around him. The police are immediately suspicious of the man's story. His girlfriend simply vanished while taking a shower? "You expect us to believe that?" the detective asks. The man has no answer, though. It's as if she simply blinked out of existence. He's convinced she must still be in the building somewhere, that she somehow slipped out without him noticing. But none of the security footage from inside the building shows anything abnormal. There's footage from the cameras in the lobby of them entering the building, but nothing after that of her leaving. Just as in every missing person case like this, the boyfriend is the #1 suspect. But without any evidence, they can't hold him any longer. After many long hours of interviews, they finally allow him to leave, but not back to the apartment, since it's an active crime scene. The man has no family to speak of, and his few friends seem to have the same suspicions as the police and want nothing to do with him. His girlfriend was the only person he truly had in the world, and now she's gone. He's put up in a shabby motel, and days pass, then weeks, then months, but no evidence of the missing woman ever turns up. The man replays the memory of that day over and over in his head, searching for some kind of answer, but try as he might, he can't remember anything helpful. No clue as to what could have happened. The case is completely cold, and has been from the very start. The police eventually have to move on to newer, more solvable cases, and they finally allow the man to return home. He's overwhelmed with emotion the first time he enters the apartment. The place is a mess. It looks like the police turned it inside out looking for clues. Not knowing what else to do, he starts the long process of cleaning up the apartment. After hours of putting things away, he eventually gathers the strength to go to the one room he's been avoiding, the bathroom. He opens the door to the last place he's certain his girlfriend was. He enters to find that it looks like the rest of the apartment, as if someone has looked at every single object. But just like him, the police never found any trace of where she went. After straightening up this last room, he decides that he should take a shower and go to bed. It fills him with dread to think about standing in the last place he knows where she was. But he's had months to grieve the loss of his girlfriend, and he's decided that he needs to move on, whatever that means when someone goes missing without a trace. He turns on the shower and lets the water heat up before stepping in. Once he's in, every thought he has is about her. He wonders if she ever actually got in the shower at all, or somehow used it as a diversion to slip out unseen. He just can't figure out how. The day's events race through his mind, just as they have 1,000 times before, but his thoughts are interrupted when he notices that the water has started to pool around his feet. He looks down and sees that the drain cover looks normal. Maybe there's a clog, though. Do showers clog when they're not used? He has no idea. He bends down to get a closer look. The long, black creature emerges from the drain in the blink of an eye and latches onto his mouth, muffling him before he even has a chance to scream. He struggles and pulls down the curtain on top of him as he falls back onto the shower floor, but it's already too late. and in a matter of minutes, he too will be gone without a trace. Is there anything more comforting after a hard day than a nice, long, hot shower? The answer to that is no, there is nothing better. But that relaxing shower might just be the last you ever take when, unbeknownst to you, your pipes are home to an instance of SCP-153, also known as drain worms. SCP-153 refers to a species that resembles the common nematode, or roundworm, consisting of a long, thin body with a large mouth on one end. While some roundworms can grow to as large as a meter long, which is in itself a disturbing thought, SCP-153 instances can be much, much larger, and it is estimated that they can reach up to nearly 10 meters in length, though it is hypothesized that some instances in the wild may grow even longer. These worm-like creatures will feed off of any available organic material. However, their favorite form of sustenance is fresh animal tissue, and they appear to have an especially strong predilection towards human flesh. In order to satiate their desire to feed on their preferred prey, SCP-153 has developed a rather unique predatory style that perfectly suits its elongated body structure. While it is unknown just where they originate, they are most often found in the pipes of sewer and drainage systems. 153 instances will swim up those pipes, seeking out ones that lead to people's homes, and especially those that connect to showers and bathtubs. Once they reach the end of the pipe, SCP-153 will latch onto the drain cover and begin secreting an acidic substance. The acid quickly dissolves the drain cover, and SCP-153 will position its own mouth in its place, which it then is able to camouflage as the missing drain cover almost perfectly. Once SCP-153 has taken this position, it is virtually impossible to distinguish it from the original or discern that anything has changed. SCP-153 will then lie in wait until it detects that someone has entered the shower or bathtub. Once the unsuspecting person has begun to bathe, it will very quickly emerge from the drain, latching onto the victim's face, most likely in order to prevent them from calling for help. It then begins to rapidly secrete more of the same acid that it used to dissolve the drain cover. With how effectively it was able to dissolve metal, it's no surprise that SCP-153 is able to quickly produce the same effect on its victim. Their skin, muscle, and bone will all be almost immediately liquefied, allowing SCP-153 to feed on the slurry. And the drain worms feed extremely quickly as well. After just several minutes, basically nothing will remain of the person who stepped into the shower, and 153 will retreat back into the drain, leaving no signs that it was ever there, save for the missing drain cover. The SCP Foundation became aware of this anomaly following multiple mysterious missing person cases that all had one key element in common. Each was reported as having disappeared after entering a bathroom to either shower or take a bath. The Foundation soon discovered that large populations of SCP-153 instances were living in the sewers beneath several major American cities, and immediately began enacting containment procedures. The Foundation collected as many specimens as they could, and brought them to Bioresearch Area 12, where they keep them contained in 10 by 10 by 5 meter tanks that are kept partially filled with sewage and other organic material for them to feed on. Of course, it is of the utmost importance that these containers are never connected to any other plumbing systems, either internal or external. With several specimens contained, the Foundation began researching the creatures in order to hopefully better understand them and how they were able to develop such complex hunting techniques. Research was also approved to find out whether they could be used as a sort of waste disposal system in certain extreme circumstances, such as with SCP-2717, a mass of living animal tissue that has grown to line nearly 4 kilometers of sewer pipes beneath Amsterdam. A small number of SCP-153 instances were approved for release into the wild in order to test whether they could stall the spread of 2717. However, this experiment was halted following some disturbing new reports. More missing person reports came to the Foundation's attention that bore the hallmarks of an SCP-153 attack, but these new reports were not limited to people who vanished after bathing. It now appears that SCP-153 has further adapted and has begun to emerge not just from showers and bathtub drains, but now also from sinks and, yes, even toilets. The Foundation is unaware of just how many instances of SCP-153 continue to exist in the wild, but there's no doubt that many continue to live and hunt undetected in sewers around the world. This anomaly, which has been classified as Euclid, is taken very seriously by the Foundation, and any reports of people who go missing from bathrooms are immediately investigated for signs of SCP-153. Field agents are to be equipped with infrared and ultraviolet sensors which can bypass SCP-153's camouflage, and if specimens are able to be captured alive, then they are to be brought to Area 12 for further research. But don't bother worrying too much the next time you step into the tub. If you've been targeted by SCP-153, there's not much you'll be able to do anyway, and your worries will soon be going down the drain, along with whatever remains of you. A prisoner in a striped uniform is led down the central corridor of a penitentiary by a pair of guards. Wherever he's being taken, the prisoner is not going peacefully. The other inmates stand at their cell doors watching as he is dragged past them. The prisoner is begging for the guards to show him mercy, pleading for them not to make him go in there, to subject him to anything in the world, but that. The guards pay no attention to his cries as they force him along. They reach the end of the corridor and stop in front of the last cell, number 667. The prisoner looks into the dark, empty cell and screams, struggling against his captors one last time before they overpower him and shove him inside, slamming the door shut behind him. The prisoner looks around the small, dim cell. All that's inside is a bed with a thin mattress and a filthy toilet. He looks extremely scared, his eyes searching around the cell as if a monster is going to leap out from a dark corner and grab him. The prisoner hears a cracking sound and jumps in fright, spinning around to see a different kind of monster. Standing between the two guards who led him here is a third prison guard. He's enormous, and the prisoner watches as he cracks the knuckles of his massive hands. The giant guard reaches for something hanging next to the cell door. It's a clipboard. He looks at the prisoner's uniform and notes his name before writing it down. The large guard asks over his shoulder, "So, what are we thinking? 1 day? 2? For this one?" One of the other guards answers. "He deserves a lot more than that for what he did." "Why, what'd he do?" asks the big one. "He attacked one of the nurses. She's in pretty bad shape." One of the nurses? The veins in the larger guard's head start to bulge out as his grip on the pencil tightens. "Who was it?" It was Gloria," the guard answers. The pencil snaps in the giant guard's hand. One of the guards quickly picks it up and hands it back to him. Through gritted teeth, he answers, "I see." As the giant guard stares at him with angry, violent eyes, the prisoner starts to slink back into the dark cell, terrified of what's going to happen to him. "You like to attack nurses, do you? Well, we're going to give you plenty of time to think about that. I'll see you in a year." The two other guards look at each other, clearly thinking that this is extreme even for a crime like this. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" one of them asks. But it's already too late. The guard has penciled in the date for exactly 1 year later. "No, please, no!" the prisoner screams, rushing towards the bars and reaching out as if it will somehow help him. But it doesn't. There's a faint rustling of wind that seems to carry the sound of whispers, and then the prisoner vanishes. He's simply gone, blinked out of existence. The guard hangs the clipboard back on the wall before turning and quickly walking away. He needs to get to the infirmary. The two guards can do nothing but shrug at each other and follow after him. "Poor guy," one of them whispers as they walk away from the empty cell. 1 year to the day later, the huge guard walks down the same prison corridor. It's late at night, and as he walks along, he lets his baton hit against the bars of the cells, making a loud clatter. "Wake up, everyone, wake up. It's a homecoming day." Sleepy prisoners get up out of their beds and stand at the front of their cells, trying their best to look through the bars to see the cell at the end of the block. "See what happens when you mess with staff? Come on, get up, today's the day. It's a homecoming." The guard gets to the end of the corridor and stops in front of the empty cell with the clipboard hanging on the wall next to it. The door is open, and there's nothing inside the dark cell except for the same dirty toilet and bed. The guard takes out his pocket watch and checks the time. Everyone, the guard and the prisoners alike, are all focused on the empty cell. The guard checks his watch again. The minute hand ticks over to midnight, and the moment it does, the cell door slides shut and locks with a loud click. The prison is completely silent, each inmate waiting with bated breath to see what happens next. The guard takes out a large, heavy ring of keys and inserts one into the cell door before stepping inside. He looks around, and still it appears that nothing inside is different. But then he spots what he's looking for. There in the corner, near the toilet, is a huddled figure in a striped prison uniform. Well, there you are." The guard starts to walk towards this person who has somehow appeared in the cell, but the huddled figure doesn't move or react in any way. The guard reaches down and puts a hand on the man to flip him over. "How'd you enjoy your stay?" Solitary confinement is one of the most brutal forms of punishment that is still in use across much of the world today. The psychological and physical distress that comes from days, weeks, months, even sometimes years spent alone can be devastating. But as horrible as this practice is, there exists a form of retribution that is even more terrifying. One that even the most hardened of criminals fear and would do anything to avoid. This is SCP-2701, also known as True Solitary. SCP-2701 is a seemingly standard-looking prison cell located in a now-condemned Pennsylvania State Penitentiary. The prison, which was built in the early mid-1800s, was showing its age long before it was finally shut down, and the cell contains only an old toilet and bed, with a clipboard hanging to the left of the cell with various forms marked as intake. The cell's construction materials appear normal, and the contents themselves are non-anomalous. It is only when someone is placed inside of SCP-2701 and the clipboard next to the cell is used that its frightening effects become evident. When a human being is locked within the cell, their name is written on the intake form and a date is filled in under the Release Date section. SCP-2701's anomalous activation event is put in motion. 13 seconds after these conditions have been met, the person inside will disappear, completely vanishing from view as if they simply no longer exist. Any attempts to better understand the process by which they dematerialize have been unsuccessful, as all recording equipment looking into or placed inside the cell will show only static or blank images during the 13 seconds before the subject disappears. Researchers observing the effect in person, though, have reported the sounds of wind and unidentified whispering voices, but it is still unknown what may be producing these. At 12:00 a.m. on the dot on the release date, the cell's door will somehow close and lock itself if it is not already shut. At this exact moment, the person who vanished will reappear within the locked cell. Unfortunately for the person who was locked inside, while they may have returned to our reality, it is unlikely that they will ever be the same. Experiments into SCP-2701 have revealed that those who are placed inside and vanish will experience a state of complete sensory deprivation while remaining fully conscious the entire time. They experience no sounds, smells, or sense of touching anything. They do not even see darkness, since that would imply sight. Instead, they truly experience no senses at all. This effect can be disastrous for the human psyche, with subjects reporting that they have developed intense fears of both shadows and light, claustrophobia, agoraphobia, and a fear of going to sleep following their time within SCP-2701. At the same time, they will have experienced no physical changes at all, including aging, no matter how much time has passed. But the worst part of SCP-2701 is that those who are locked inside do not experience time at the same rate as you or I. No, tests have revealed that once someone disappears from within the cell, they will feel as if time has been significantly stretched out, with the dilation effect causing them to perceive time at a rate that has been estimated to be between 300 and 400 times longer than normal. That means that someone placed inside for 2 hours will experience time as if they had been locked away for 25 to 33 days, while someone placed inside for a whole year will feel as though they have been floating in a void of nothingness for several centuries. Foundation researchers have theorized that the absence of any outside stimulation for that long of a period causes the mind to break down rational thought structures in an effort to mitigate stress, and that a complete psychological breakdown soon follows. In order to better understand the effects of SCP-2701, the SCP Foundation embarked on a number of tests using Class D personnel. In one experiment, which was performed on a D class known as D77391, the event started at 11:45 p.m., and the release date was set for the coming midnight. This led to the D class being inside the cell for 15 minutes, though they experienced their time within as having lasted 75 to 100 hours. When D77391 was interviewed 6 hours after reappearing, they described their time inside as being a true hell. Experiencing nothing but emptiness, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't sleep, they couldn't even scream. They were left alone with only their thoughts and memories. The only thing that kept them from completely losing their mind was something one of the researchers told them before they entered the cell. The researcher told them that no matter what they felt, that they had to hold on to the idea that they were going to come back. They needed to remember they wouldn't be in there forever. While these words of encouragement did seem to stave off the worst of the mental effects D77391 could have suffered, they also impacted the results of the experiment, and the offending researcher was later reassigned to a different project, following a 6-month suspension. The SCP Foundation first became aware of SCP-2701 following reports of certain abnormalities at a Pennsylvania state penitentiary. There were numerous complaints by lawyers that they were not being allowed to meet with their clients and that they were being denied access to the site by the prison's warden. When police were finally dispatched to the site to investigate, it was discovered that the entire prison, which previously housed 137 inmates and employed a number of staff, had only one inhabitant: the warden. He described the activation procedure for cell 667 and explained that he had placed every single prisoner inside one by one and made them disappear. He had been keeping the funds that were supposed to be used for the care of the inmates, as well as to bribe officials and former staff in order to keep the warden's scheme secret and prevent any official inquiries. The warden surrendered to the police without incident, and an undercover Foundation agent within the Philadelphia police soon alerted SCP agents to the cell's anomalous effects. When a Foundation team arrived on site, they found the cell exactly as described, along with the intake forms. The prison warden had been telling the truth. Over 100 forms were filled out with inmates' names, with release dates ranging from 50 to over 1,300 years in the future. The ease with which SCP-2701 is able to be contained has led to it receiving the Safe classification. The former prison where SCP-2701 is located is monitored at all times by video and audio surveillance, and a security guard equipped with full-body restraints is present at all times to both detain any subjects who appear within the cell, as well as prevent any new ones from being placed inside that aren't a part of an official SCP Foundation experiment.
You're staring into the grinning face of the inhuman flight attendant. Her eyes too large and far apart. Her teeth too sharp and too numerous. Her skin shiny and wet. Fish-like. She holds the glistening chrome can and peels off the lid. Inside, thick, knotted worms wriggle together. Your in-flight snack. Hungry? Less than an hour earlier, the researcher sits in his office at SCP Foundation Site 3A, eyes excitedly glued to the monitor on his desk. On it, he can see a live video feed being streamed directly from the camera pinned to the collar of D-Class 1442. Through this remote viewing setup, the researcher will be able to view the first manned testing of a recently acquired anomaly, one so new that the official file is still actively being written. As a relatively new researcher at the organization, this is his chance to make his mark on Foundation history. The anomaly is a plane, an entire plane retrieved from the Pacific Ocean and brought to a hangar at the site. Like many items recovered by the Foundation, it seems perfectly normal at first glance. In fact, it almost seems too normal. After crashing into the ocean, the aircraft should be visibly damaged, but there's nothing wrong with it. Not so much as a scratch on the exterior. The interior is pristine, and the mechanical parts are all perfectly operational. So the higher-ups approved a series of tests to determine what exactly is so strange about this plane. The best way to do that is to see it in action. Multiple D-Class have been placed inside, scattered in various seats throughout the cabin. In the cockpit, the only agent at Site 3A with a pilot's license, Agent Kulkarni, prepares for takeoff. He sends a quick message to the researcher at the monitor, letting him know that all systems are operational and ready to go. It's time for this mysterious plane to take to the skies, and the researcher has a front-row seat. The takeoff goes smoothly, with no notable anomalous activity. At this point, it just feels like watching a first-person simulation of a typical airline experience. Then, as the plane reaches cruising altitude, the intercom crackles to life, and a chipper voice makes an announcement.
Hello everyone, and welcome to your flight with Kingfisher Airlines. I'll be your pilot. Now that we've successfully taken off, make sure to keep your seatbelts unbuckled. Make our jobs a little easier, huh?
The researcher's brow furrows at the sound. That is not Agent Kulkarni's voice. Who is that talking? He sends a message to Agent Kulkarni, but gets no response. Right, of course, he's too busy flying the plane. The researcher jots down a note on his clipboard, recording the first instance of anomalous activity on the plane. Then, he returns his gaze to the monitor. He can see on the video feed that D-1442 has unbuckled their seatbelt in accordance with the announcement's instructions. None of the D-Class appear to react to the announcement, aside from taking off their seatbelts. As D-1442's camera pans down to the floor of the cabin, the researcher begins furiously scribbling notes once more. There's water running through the aisles of the plane, soaking the carpeted floor. The researcher squints, noting dots of green throughout the water. Mold? No. Seaweed. He's certain of it. The water trickles under D-1442's seat, soaking their shoes, and the researcher waits for a reaction. But it never comes. It's as if the D-Class hasn't noticed the apparent seawater spilling into the plane. The camera pans around the plane, and much to the researcher's surprise and frustration, none of the other D-Class are reacting either. He scribbles down some more notes. This must be part of the plane's anomalous nature. Those inside don't notice that anything unusual is happening, even though it is. But why seawater? He underlines the question several times for emphasis, but no answer reveals itself. At least, not yet. He has to admit, it's a bit unsettling to see a plane full of D-Class acting as if they're on a perfectly ordinary trip on a perfectly ordinary plane, as saltwater pools in their shoes, seeping into their socks. Look at the seaweed floating through the waves of water. The researcher can almost smell it, the briny sting of salt in his nose. He wonders what it might mean, and shudders as his imagination runs wild. Perhaps the plane drowns its passengers. Nope, there's no use getting ahead of himself. Better to just wait and see what happens next. It doesn't take long for the next dramatic development to unfold on the monitor. The camera shakes violently as the plane apparently experiences some turbulence. As if reading his mind, D-1442 makes a comment about the turbulence, turning the camera toward the window. Just like the water, D-1442 cannot see anything unusual outside. But on his monitor, sitting in his office, the researcher can see the truth, even if he doesn't understand what it means yet. There's something caught on the wing of the plane, that much he knows for sure. He squints, leaning forward until his nose is almost touching the screen. What is that? The plane rocks again, and the wing is yanked upward a bit by what he can now see as some kind of wire. He can't see where it ends. It just extends up into the sky until it vanishes from view. And then D-1442 is turning the camera away from the window again, and the researcher can no longer inspect the wire tangled on the wing. The camera is now trained on the aisle again, where two figures are trudging through the sopping wet carpet, wheeling a wobbly cart. As they move down the aisle and closer to the camera, the researcher manages to get a better look at them. A man and a woman, neither of whom look familiar to him, both dressed in matching blue uniforms. On their blazers, they each wear a pin in the shape of a fish and a hook. Atop their heads, blue hats are pinned in place. Though there is nothing immediately off about their appearances, their very presence is of concern to the researcher. There were no flight attendants placed on board. Why would there be? This goes beyond seawater and strange wires on the wings. Now there are brand new humanoids anomalously appearing aboard the plane, wobbling down the aisle with a cart full of drinks. No, not drinks, cans of some kind. As the flight attendants walk, the researcher takes note of their unusual gaits. They move with awkward, arrhythmic plodding steps, like a newborn deer learning to walk for the very first time. For a baby animal, it's endearing. For two supposedly adult humans who have appeared as if from nowhere, wheeling their cart of mysterious cans, it sends a shiver down the researcher's spine. As the female flight attendant approaches D-1442, shiny metal can in hand, the camera captures a glimpse of her face up close. Her eyebrows are drawn on too high, giving her a wide-eyed, shock appearance. No, it isn't just the eyebrows. Her eyes themselves are a bit too wide. Her mouth is stretched in a broad, red lipstick grin, showing just a few too many teeth for the researcher to feel at ease. As she offers the can to D-1442, and they reach out to take it, the researcher notes that the flight attendant does not blink once. She never speaks either. She just holds that unsettling smile and waits for D-1442 to take the can from her hand. Then she moves on to the next passenger. D-1442's camera tilts down toward the can, and they peel back the lid to reveal its contents. As the lens focuses, the researcher's stomach turns at the sight. The can is filled to the brim with writhing, squirming, fat and juicy earthworms. The sort his father used to bring on family fishing trips to bait the hooks with when he was a little boy. D-1442 reaches into the can and pulls out a long, wriggling worm, lifting it toward their face. No, please don't do it. But they can't feel the researcher's revulsion, nor do they seem to even realize they're holding a worm and not a more conventional airplane snack. The camera is mercifully turned away from D-1442's face, so the researcher doesn't have to watch, but he can hear the wet chewing, and he knows exactly what is happening. He covers his mouth, fighting the urge to gag as he watches the rest of the D-Class follow suit, opening their cans and beginning to eat the worms one at a time. With all of the worms passed out, the two flight attendants begin to shamble back up the aisle, pushing the cart through the thick layer of green seaweed that now blankets the floor. There's even more of it than there was a few moments ago, and the researcher can no longer see any of the carpet beneath. The two flight attendants vanish behind the curtain at the front of the plane, leaving the passengers alone with their worms. Nothing else unusual happens for nearly 2 hours, and the researcher sits and watches as every passenger in the camera's line of sight slowly devours each and every worm in their respective can, occasionally idly glancing out the window or flipping through a magazine. The researcher is just beginning to think the anomalous events might be over when the curtain opens once again. The female flight attendant is back. At least, he thinks it must be her. The silhouette looks the same, but it's difficult to be certain. Her face is no longer visible. Instead, it is wrapped in wires that look identical to those spotted on the wing during the supposed turbulence earlier. The wires are draped around her entire body, hanging from her arms, her shoulders, and brushing along the floor next to her shoes. As the flight attendant begins to walk down the aisle in those same eerie plodding steps, she reaches out to a passenger, and the researcher nearly falls out of his chair in shock. Her hands. They aren't hands anymore. They've been replaced with fishing hooks, giant fishing hooks the size of the hands she once had. She walks past D-1442, headed toward the back of the plane. She's out of sight for a few moments until she crosses back into the camera's view. There's a passenger with her, a D-Class with his hands tied together behind his back, wrists bound with something thin and transparent. Again, the researcher remembers those trips with his father. Fishing line. The man is bound with fishing line. He follows the flight attendant with a docile expression, seemingly unconcerned by his state of captivity, the strange wires, and her hook hands. As the flight attendant and the passenger pass the camera, the researcher can see that he was mistaken. She does not just have one passenger with her. She has 5, all with their wrists bound in fishing line, all following her without one word of protest or attempt to resist. The flight attendant and the 5 passengers all vanish through the curtain. D-1442 places the now empty can of worms in the back pocket of the seat in front of them. Then, everything is still again for a while, save for the continuous flow of seawater through the aisles, filling the cabin inch by inch. It is at D-1442's knees now and creeping ever higher. Still, they do not budge. All of a sudden, the plane shakes violently. D-1442's gaze, and the camera with it, snaps toward the window. There, cloud formations rapidly whirl through the air, pouring buckets of water. Lightning flashes, illuminating the darkened sky for a moment. In that moment, brief though it is, the researcher can make out some odd shapes snaking through the air, weaving between the clouds. Another flash of lightning reveals them. Eels. If his guess is correct, he'd say they are electric eels specifically. D-1442 does not see the eels, but does seem to be affected by the sudden, dramatic change in the weather. They chuckle nervously, voice quavering slightly, and remark that this thunderstorm wasn't predicted on the Weather Channel that morning. The plane shakes again as another flash of lightning breaks through the darkness, revealing more and more eels. The window itself is wobbling, the glass beginning to buckle under the pressure of the water outside, more and more pouring against it. Crash! The glass shatters, and water pours in through the open window, where there should be roaring wind. An eel flies through the window, landing on D-1442's lap. It flops furiously back and forth as D-1442 passively ignores it. The water levels begin to rise rapidly, up and over D-1442's legs, up their chest, until the water is covering the camera lens. Luckily, the camera is outfitted for underwater filming, though the researcher never expected that particular function to be relevant while testing an anomalous airplane. It continues to pick up video, displaying it all on the monitor as it begins to shake violently. The sound of choking can be heard as D-1442 attempts to keep breathing normally, even with water flooding their mouth and lungs. They choke and splutter, slowly drowning without even realizing they're underwater. The camera begins to drift upward, floating away from its place on D-1442. As it hits the ceiling, it swivels and reveals D-1442's unconscious body, floating there below. The rest of the passengers, the ones who didn't leave with the flight attendant earlier, are also drifting through the water, unconscious or worse. Their bodies are covered in green, the seaweed from before growing over them. The researcher is writing furiously now, getting down every detail. When he finishes writing, he grabs his phone. He needs to get back in communication with Agent Kulkarni and figure out an extraction plan before the man drowns, if he hasn't already. The phone rings, but no answer. He should have expected that. It's probably been damaged by the water too. The researcher is just about to contact the site director and ask what to do when the camera picks up motion coming from behind the curtain. Something is emerging from the cockpit. The curtain is shoved to the side, and out bursts Agent Kulkarni. He appears to be breathing steadily, despite being underwater. He looks terrified, disoriented, but otherwise unaffected by the chaos unfolding around him. His eyes widen, his eyelids flutter, and he collapses to the ground. His body convulses, as if he's having a seizure. He opens his mouth as if to scream, but nothing comes out. Well, at least no sound comes out. Something else does. His jaw opens wider, wider, and wider still, his jaw unhinging like a snake, or an eel, the researcher thinks. There's a glint of metal in the back of his throat, and all at once, a large fishing hook comes rocketing out of his mouth. Another follows it, and another, all connected to fishing line that seems to come from deep in Agent Kulkarni's stomach. Whatever anomalous forces have changed the plane, filled it with water, created eels and flight attendants, have also changed him. The hooks push through the water, moving of their own accord, and attach themselves to the remaining passengers. Some only hook their clothes, others hook deeper, and blood colors the water. Something, and the camera doesn't pick up what, grabs hold of Agent Kulkarni's leg, pulling him back into the darkness beyond the curtain. As he goes, his body pulls the fishing line, dragging the hooks and the passengers with him. One by one, they vanish from view until the plane is empty. The intercom crackles impossibly beneath the water, and the same unrecognizable voice speaks.
Thank you for flying with Kingfisher.
Silence for a moment, then static. The video feed has been lost. The researcher throws his clipboard against the wall, unable to contain his rage. They lost an entire plane full of D-Class and his valued colleague, and received no concrete answers about the plane. If anything, he has far more questions. One of which is, where is the plane now? A recovery team manages to locate the plane in a surprising place. It lands a few hours later in the same place where it took off. It should be damaged, filled with water, covered in broken windows and gouges from those hooks. But it is just as spotless as it was when they found it. Not a drop of water or speck of seaweed to be seen. No sign of any of its passengers either, or the captain. The only thing on the plane that wasn't there before is the camera, completely dry, sitting in D1442's seat as if nothing ever happened. Its locally recorded video confirms the researcher's witness account. Everything he saw seems to be completely real. All planned test flights that were intended to follow this first one are canceled due to concerns from the ethics committee, as well as budgetary concerns regarding the loss of staff. The researcher turns in his notes, his job complete. Then he requests a transfer to another assignment. He's had quite enough of SCP-3531. I can't say I blame him. I was never fond of flying in the first place, but this anomaly has introduced a new level of dread to the experience. SCP-3531 is a Boeing 737 airliner that is unremarkable in every way at first glance. The exterior and interior appear normal, and when not in flight, the plane is completely non-anomalous. When SCP-3531 is in flight, however, that's a different story. Photographs, videos, and audio recordings taken inside of the craft while it is in the air show forms of aquatic-based anomalous phenomena, as well as humanoid figures that manifest and act as flight attendants, despite not being present before the plane takes off. However, in spite of this obviously unusual phenomena, observers are either ignorant of it or unwilling to acknowledge it. Even when presented with video evidence, they will refuse to believe it. Outside witnesses appear to be unaffected, with the ignorance or inability to perceive the anomalies limited to those physically inside of the plane. SCP-3531 was first discovered by the SCP Foundation when Mobile Task Force Lambda-4 birdwatchers conducted a routine inspection of the plane's black box footage. The footage included the following recorded audio.
Look, I'll get you your shipment. We've been held up with processing. Yes, I know how many times I've said it. It's finicky. No, I swear, it's just logistics. The clothes are the main problem. We can't get them off mid-flight, so... It's not the attendants, no, they're working fine, but it's hard enough to convince the people that they're on a normal flight. Getting them to, prepare themselves like that would be... No, I'm sorry, it'll be fine. Just, it shouldn't take much longer. The shipment will be...
The voice on the recording was identified as Mrs. Janet Kaminsky, a missing pilot who was presumed dead along with the crew and passengers of the flight. How did they all die? The plane crashed into the Pacific Ocean. I can't be certain of what happened, but if I had to guess, I'd say she made that shipment after all. SCP-3531 is stored in the hangar of Site 3A. Tests using SCP-3531 may only be conducted at the discretion of the site director. The details of SCP-3531's nature are somewhat sparse, at least in terms of what is available to someone not assigned to its research team. The best that I can surmise is this. Kingfisher is not a legitimate airline, though I'm sure you've already figured that out. I believe they are a company that services clientele who are interested in fishing, though not for what we might think of as traditional fish. It would seem that humans are loaded onto this anomalous aircraft and kept there, seated and docile, for Kingfisher's clients to capture. Whoever or whatever these clients are, presumably the voices on the other side of Janet Kaminsky's phone call, they are fishing for humans using anomalous means. Who knows how many shipments were made using SCP-3531 before it was seized by the Foundation? The fictitious airline, the plane, the flight attendants, all made for the perfect ruse, and the victims fell for it hook, line, and sinker. A young researcher is thrown against the wall so hard that his spine breaks. A man turned into a scarecrow. A woman unmoored from gravity. A man losing a vital component of his brain. All these poisoned prizes can be yours if you have your hands on a certain special object. The thief is confused, to say the least, at the sight before him. It isn't exactly what he has been expecting to find on his travel to the Forgotten Cave. The strange object is displayed on an altar, with a beam emanating from somewhere above, shining a bright column of moonlight onto it. This must be the treasure that he was sent here for. But what was this strange treasure? He's still aching all over from his long journey, many days and nights spent crossing the desert just to reach his destination. All around the cavern are precious stones and gold coins, jewelry and riches beyond the thief's wildest dreams, and it's all his for the taking, just as long as he fulfills his promise to the strange, decrepit old man he met at the entrance of the cave. The thief steps closer to the altar and examines the object the old man told him to recover. Upon hearing the word lamp, the thief had been picturing an ornate oil jug with a handle and spout, not this thing. The thief had never seen an object quite like it. It's a tall, thin neck that winds upwards from a flat, circular base. The top looks like the hem of a dress, but far smaller and made from green glass. It's a lamp, all right, but not as this thief would know it. He lifts it up to get a closer look and notices something. An empty space beneath the stained glass lampshade. It looks like there's a part missing. Nearby, he comes across another curiosity, a rounded, almost perfect sphere of glass, with an elongated protrusion terminating in a metal connector. It seems like it would be the perfect fit for the vacant port on the lamp. So, figuring out how to affix the two, the thief attaches the light bulb to the lamp. To his surprise, the bulb begins to glow a light blue. Cautiously, he places it back down and backs away, uncertain about what is about to happen next. A sudden plume of blue smoke erupts from the lamp, and the thief ducks for cover, thinking the object has exploded. But there's no loud sound, no flames, and this prompts him to peek out from his hiding place to see a mysterious figure emerging from the cloud. It looks to be an older man, hovering above the ground, not legs, but a tail of the same smoke as the rest of his body. Now the thief recognizes what's going on. He's grown up with stories of creatures almost exactly like this one, and it fills him with a rush of excitement. It's a genie. He can remember as clear as day tales about genies. They are mystical wish-givers, imprisoned within lamps and then bound to the person who discovers them. Once it emerges from its slumber, a genie will then offer whoever freed it 3 wishes.
Hey, you there. You gonna hide all night? Come on, kid, let's get this over with. What'll it be?
The genie asks rather brashly. The thief approaches the smoky, translucent figure and immediately knows exactly what to do. He's already thought of exactly what to ask for, the wish that can free him from his life of stealing and poverty. "Genie, I wish for you to make me rich," he says. As soon as he's finished his sentence, the genie vanishes, leaving the thief confused. Surely he still had another 2 wishes. He's startled as the light bulb he had affixed to the lamp suddenly explodes, for real this time, with a spark and a shower of small glass shards. Before the thief can so much as call for the genie to return and demand that it explain itself, he feels a sickly churning in his stomach. Something is very, very wrong. After a few short moments of violent and painful sickness, the thief lays dead on the floor of the cavern. If one from a more advanced period of history were to examine him, they'd find the thief's body exposed to an extremely large overdose of vitamin C, enough to kill him. The genie had made him rich. It just goes to show the old warning to be careful what you wish for is always applicable, especially when you find yourself making a wish from SCP-4035. Although it might look like an unassuming table lamp from the outside, within it stored an ancient entity who also happens to be wildly unpredictable, and a bit of a jerk, to be completely honest. Anyone examining SCP-4035 will notice the first odd thing about it fairly quickly. The lamp itself is rather unremarkable, composed of a simple iron base with a conical lampshade above. Its pattern-stained glass sports a number of shades of green, and overall, it looks like the type of lamp you might find at a grandparent's house, or a distant elderly relative who always tells you just how much you've grown when you visit every 5 to 10 years, and whose home decor hasn't changed since the mid-1970s. But the first of SCP-4035's many strange properties is that it doesn't actually seem to work. Closer inspection of the lamp itself will reveal that it doesn't actually have any electrical components whatsoever. There's no wiring running through it, no cable leading to a plug that can be affixed to a wall socket, no switch, nothing. Except for a standard light bulb socket. So naturally, anyone coming across this seemingly useless table lamp will feel compelled to find a light bulb and see if the thing actually works. That's when things get even stranger. Light bulbs placed into SCP-4035 will indeed illuminate, despite the lack of electricity powering the lamp. There won't appear to be anything unusual about its functionality at first, other than the bulbs inserted into SCP-4035 will produce a blue-tinted light. But surely that's just because of its ornate stained glass lampshade, right? Wrong. Shortly after placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, that's when he emerges. Who is he? Well, the Foundation knows him as SCP-4035-1, but for the sake of brevity, let's just call him the Genie. Emerging from the lamp will be an entity that seems to be gaseous in its composition, lacking a tangible, physical form, and instead appearing to be incorporeal, almost like a ghost, or a man made of vapors. This being has been described as having the characteristics of a middle-aged, balding man, looking to be somewhere between his 40s and 50s. Whenever he appears, the Genie always looks the same, always sporting a patchy brown suit coat. Beneath, however, he has no visible legs, and in their place is a cloud of blue gas that emanates from the lower body of SCP-4035-1. As soon as SCP-4035-1 appears, he will strike up a conversation with whoever placed a light bulb in the lamp that contains him. Now, you might be forgiven for perhaps predicting how the next interaction typically plays out. After all, you've seen Aladdin. A genie appears and offers to grant the person who discovered its lamp 3 wishes. However, the person making the wishes has to be very careful with how they word their requests to the magical entity. One wrong word, and they might find themselves suffering some unforeseen consequences. Or perhaps it unfolds like other myths and fables involving genies. The wishes are granted, but they come at a terrible, maybe even fatal, price. Well, you'd be almost right to expect something like that from this genie, but let's just say that SCP-4035-1 doesn't exactly enjoy doing things by the book. The genie introduces itself, usually under some randomly selected false name. Some favorites of his during past encounters have included Bobby, Spiff, Danny Fry, and Josephi Krakowski. Now you can see why just calling him the Genie is a lot simpler. Anyway, after he manifests, SCP-4035-1 won't offer 3 wishes, but instead offers to sell a product to whoever placed a light bulb in SCP-4035.
Attempts to ask the genie to elaborate on the product being offered are usually met with an evasive response and little detail being revealed. Once the person or subject talking to SCP-4035-1 responds, the genie then, in effect, grants their wish. They can just be trying to converse with the entity, but it will regard even a completely unrelated verbal response as an answer. The subjects typically receive a biological modification or other anomalous ability that directly relates to what they said to the genie, and we do mean directly. Once again, you might be forgiven for expecting that being granted supernatural powers by a magical genie would be a fun experience. After all, who doesn't want anomalous abilities? But be warned, the abilities SCP-4035-1 hands out usually fit the description of lackluster and disappointing. Why? Well, because typically, the anomalous modifications the genie makes are highly detrimental to the subject in question. You see, SCP-4035-1 has a habit of taking things extremely literally, almost to a pedantic extent, intentionally misinterpreting and leaving any who accidentally make a wish with it harmful changes to their minds and bodies. And like most genies from mythology, this one doesn't undo the wishes that it grants. After bestowing someone with abilities that usually leave them in agony or distress, the genie disappears back into SCP-4035, causing the light bulb inside to violently explode. Should someone attempt to replace it and get the genie to reverse whatever horrific change it has made, its voice will emanate from the lamp and yell,
Sorry, kid, no refunds.
But how bad could these abilities possibly be? Well, to find out the answer, you only have to take a look at a select few of the numerous tests the SCP Foundation has done involving SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock, at one point in time, is assigned to be the head researcher in charge of conducting experiments on SCP-4035. The approach he takes is sending members of disposable D-Class personnel to interact with the lamp and genie, then record the results. The first test unfolds as follows. The subject, a D-Class with the designation number D4088, is sent into the containment chamber that houses SCP-4035. Dr. Bannock instructs him to place a light bulb in the socket and request telepathic abilities from SCP-4035-1. However, as the genie emerges, its sudden presence startles the D-Class, and he makes an expletive exclamation that we won't repeat. It was words to the effect of, "What the heck is this?" As a result, the genie grants D4088 an ability that relates to the sentence he said. And to call it particularly unpleasant might be something of an understatement. You see, because of a certain word the D-Class had used, the genie gives him the ability to identify the chemical composition of what we'll refer to as waste. The fact that he can even identify what kind of creature said waste comes from does little to make D4088 happy with his newfound power. Dr. Bannock is forced to refine his experimentation strategy following this bungled first attempt. In the lead-up to the second test, he informs the next D-Class candidate of what exactly they will be facing when they enter the chamber, so as not to be caught by surprise at the sight of the genie. As a result, the second D-Class subject repeats the process of activating SCP-4035 and calmly repeats the request for telepathic abilities that he's been told to ask for. "I'd like to be able to read minds." Unfortunately, his wording means things haven't exactly gone according to plan. Testing with this subject reveals he hasn't developed any telepathic abilities. Disappointed, Dr. Bannock has the subject released back into Foundation incarceration alongside his fellow D-Class prisoners. However, several weeks pass, and it soon becomes apparent what ability this inmate has been granted. He encounters another D-Class, one of many pulled from maximum security prisons around the globe. This particular inmate has a tattoo on his forehead of a few words in Chinese. However, to the former test subject, these phrases appear to have been translated to English and read, "Cuban butter mustache." When he reveals the mistake made by his fellow inmate's tattoo artist, the subject is attacked and beaten up. He had, however, gained the ability to read minds. He can understand any form of writing on the forehead of a living being. A little time passes, and Dr. Bannock finds himself still struggling to get SCP-4035-1 to bestow any worthwhile abilities to test subjects. The genie just seems to take everything far too literally, interpreting every wish with no regard for normal speech and colloquialisms, even disregarding the safety of the person making the wish. Dr. Bannock conducts yet another test, sending a member of D-Class to speak with the genie,
and telling him to wish for muscle regeneration. The D-Class places the request with SCP-4035-1 seemingly without issue. However, then comes the next part, testing whether this new anomalous ability actually works the way Dr. Bannock intends. The subject of this latest experiment is intentionally injured. As this happens, his body appears to rapidly change. His muscular system swells up and multiplies, increasing from its original size. A successful test, right? Well, it would be, if the rapid muscle regeneration actually stopped. Before long, the D-Class test subject's muscle tissue is almost 250% bigger than its original size, making it much bigger than the rest of his body too. The subject is clearly highly distressed, although fortunately, this doesn't continue for long. Unfortunately, that's because his body can't function normally with this new rapid change, and as a result, the D-Class subject's vital signs stop after 3 short seconds. Getting more and more frustrated with the disastrous outcomes, Dr. Bannock makes the decision to simplify the requests made to the Genie. Surely it can't misinterpret one word, can it? The next test that Bannock conducts sees yet another unwitting member of D-Class, D-1899, entering the containment chamber and placing a light bulb within SCP-4035, just like her predecessors have done. She follows her instructions, and as the Genie appears, she asks for one thing: flight. A short while later, the Genie once again vanishes and leaves D-1899 with her wish. She has instantly become unaffected by the Earth's gravitational pull like normal. Within seconds, she is floating above the ground, as if experiencing the zero gravity of traveling in outer space. That certainly sounds idyllic, doesn't it? After all, who doesn't wish they could fly? To be granted the unique opportunity to view the majesty of the world from high above. Just one problem, though: getting back down. D-1899 quickly realizes, as does an agitated Dr. Bannock, that she isn't in control of her newfound flying abilities. She can't alter her direction or return back down to ground level at will. She's stuck, floating in the air, only able to affect her trajectory by propelling herself off of solid structures. The results of SCP-4035 tests continue to be somewhat undesirable, to say the least. An interaction with the Genie that begins with the phrase, hey man, causes the D-Class who spoke to be suddenly replaced with a crude scarecrow. When another subject makes a wish for a new life, they die almost instantly, only for moments later, one of the Foundation's researchers to suddenly give birth to a baby with identical genetic makeup to the now deceased D-Class. Another test sees a member of D-Class personnel enter the containment chamber with the instruction to wish for whatever they can think of. Put on the spot, they're unsure what to request when the Genie appears, and instead, they only offer up the response, I don't know. Moments later, this subject falls into a catatonic state and eventually passes away. An autopsy of the subject's body reveals that their hippocampus has been removed. Thanks to the Genie, they literally didn't know anything. Further testing with SCP-4035 is later carried out. However, it should be noted that the next instance of a recorded experiment with the Genie isn't one that was authorized by the SCP Foundation. Rather, hearing that there was a Genie being tested, junior researcher Jacobson decides to try and make his ultimate wish come true. He's never been all that lucky in love, and it's left the young Foundation researcher with a little insecurity. Nothing that a visit to SCP-4035-1 can't fix, surely. Despite not being authorized to use SCP-4035, junior researcher Jacobson approaches the lamp within its containment chamber. He then repeats the process to make SCP-4035-1 appear, and then requests that the Genie grant his wish. Make me more attractive? In an ideal world, this scenario wraps up with junior researcher Jacobson becoming more handsome by conventional standards, perhaps even improving his sense of insecurity as a result. But by now, you can probably guess, that isn't what happens at all. Instead, being as literal as ever, the Genie grants the young researcher's wish and makes him more attractive. Seconds later, as soon as the Genie has demanifested, Jacobson is suddenly flung across the containment chamber and smacked sharply against the solid wall. The sheer force of the impact gives the junior researcher a severe spinal fracture. Of course, this catches the attention of Foundation security, who bring junior researcher Jacobson to the on-site medical center. There, he is given a full analysis, and this reveals the extent of just how attractive the Genie has made him. Junior researcher Jacobson's epidermis, his outer layer of skin, has been given properties similar to that of a high-powered magnet. he has been magnetically attracted to the metallic walls of the containment chamber, resulting in a spinal injury that would claim his life only 2 hours later. The extensive testing with SCP-4035 is still ongoing, and as a result, the Foundation sees it fit to keep a large supply of light bulbs near the lamp's containment chamber. Dr. Bannock's research seems to indicate that while a person is in close proximity with SCP-4035, they are more likely to suffer a sudden and inexplicable speech problem. For example, the most common of these are parapraxis, commonly known as a Freudian slip, or ankyloglossia, which is a condition wherein the skin joining a person's tongue to the bottom of their mouth is shorter than usual, and this affects normal tongue movement, sometimes being called a tongue tie. Being closer to SCP-4035-1 increases the chances of suffering some form of unintended speech mistake by 68% when talking to the Genie. To cut a long story short, the Genie doesn't just intentionally and obtusely interpret everything literally, but also directly affects how clear a person will be while making their wish. As for exactly where SCP-4035 comes from, there's little information available. Some theories suggest it might well be an actual mythological genie who is just tired of spending so many centuries in the business of granting wishes for mortals. After all, imagine you get trapped in a desk lamp for all eternity and have to magically fulfill the requests of anyone that comes across you. Living through that for so long is liable to make a genie bitter and petty. Then again, perhaps the genie isn't even really a genuine genie. It doesn't inhabit an oil lamp, but instead a broken table lamp. And instead of granting wishes in the way they're intended, it misinterprets and takes things too literally, leaving the poor fools who thought they'd be blessed with supernatural powers to deal with the consequences. But perhaps that's the point. If nothing else, the genie residing in SCP-4035 serves as a reminder of that important lesson: to be careful what you wish for. In any case, if we were going looking for a genie, we'd take the friendly Robin Williams type over this pedantic jerk any day.
Introducing Tamagotchi. Are your parents super lame and refusing to buy you a pet? Well, eat my shorts, Mom and Dad. With the all-new Tamagotchi, you can have the best pet you could ever ask for, living in the digisphere in your pocket. With 3 simple buttons and a chain to hang your keyrings on, you can make your Tamagotchi your own. Care for it day and night, watch them sleep, play bodacious games, and make sure you keep an eye out for if they need to go to the toilet. P.U. Throw it in your backpack and take it to school. Just don't let your teacher catch you. Oh, snap! Tamagotchis are DrBob. Bet you really want to go and buy one now, don't you?
The detective throws her bag onto the couch. She wanted nothing more than to have thrown it off as soon as she walked through the door, but if anything in it broke, she'd be screwed. They don't have the money for rent at the moment. Can't be adding additional costs onto that. Her boyfriend barely glances up at her from the couch, still wearing the same blue t-shirt he'd worn to bed last night and with a packet of Doritos next to him. It's pretty obvious how he spent his day. The TV switches to another commercial. She taps him gently on the shoulder, offering him a warm smile. He jumps a little, seeming to come out of a little reverie. Affection fills his eyes as soon as he sets them on her. He hastily brushes Doritos dust off his hands and holds them up, tapping out words in sign language. "Sorry, I zoned out. How was your day?" The detective sinks into her usual spot on the couch and snuggles up next to him, nuzzling her head into his neck. After a quick hug, she untangles her hands and signs her reply. Long. He kisses her on her forehead. She goes on to tell him all about the case she's been working on. It's more of a hunch at this point than a case, really. There's been a big spree of shopliftings, burglaries, and muggings over the last couple of months. A significant uptick from this time last year, but everyone is at a loss to figure out why. She's having to spend a lot more on gas driving around to break-ins at the moment. Her boyfriend watches her hands recount the events with a tender look of concern on his face. "Don't worry," she signs. "I'll make sure they reimburse me for the gas." He nods and seems to relax a little. She hesitates before signing the next bit. "Did you do any job applications today?" Her boyfriend sighs and shakes his head. He looks ready to be told off, but instead, she gives him a big cuddle. Something in him seems to break, and after a moment, she can feel him shaking in her arms. Even though she can't hear him, the detective knows her boyfriend well enough to know that he is crying. She pulls away from him and makes firm, reassuring eye contact with him before signing, "It's okay. We can do the next one together if that would be easier." And so the two of them do that. They cook dinner together, her boyfriend listening to the radio while she enjoys the feeling of the bass in her chest.
Then, once everything is washed up and the apartment is dark and cozy, they sit down at their kitchen table and handwrite a cover letter. They would have typed it up on their Macintosh, but they'd sold that and their printer a few months ago to cover their utility bills. But handwriting is okay too. Her boyfriend had been working at Dell when they met. 1993, the height of the dot-com boom, when any kid with a math degree and a keyboard could shoot up the ladders in tech giants across the country. 2 years later, that bubble burst, and he'd lost his job. Fiercely smart and incredibly kind, her boyfriend hadn't been able to find work for around 13 months now. Every day, the detective's heart broke a little more to see how low his confidence was dipping. He was an amazing person, by far the most exceptional guy she'd ever met and ever would meet. And yet the constant rejection letters, failed interviews, and lack of options had steadily worn him down to a delicate and exhausted ghost of himself. But that only makes her want to love and support him even more. He scrawls a signature at the bottom of the cover letter, and they carefully fold it, along with his resume, and slide them both into an envelope. She cuddles him from behind and gives him a gross wet kiss on his cheek, enough to make him giggle. There, at least he's got one happy moment from today. He turns to her and grins, raising his hands to talk to her. I might buy a Tamagotchi. A what? The commercial on TV. It was playing when you got home. I really want one. Can I buy one? A little twinge pulls at her heart. She really ought to say no. Money is so tight at the moment with them both relying on her income. And it's hard to... What is she saying? He's clearly going through a lot right now, and maybe something fun would be good for him. Even if it does just look like some silly kid's toy from Japan. She raises her hands. Of course you can. And the pair of them go back over to the TV and flick it on. The next day is a bit of a blur. It's the detective's first day on yet another shoplifting, her first foray into fashion. Pairs of Air Jordans on display had been stolen, smashed glass everywhere. But the thieves had left all the cash in the register. A couple other items were missing too, all very hip stuff. Tie-dye shirts, Janko jeans, a lot of camouflage, that kind of thing. Stuff that's on TV and the radio all the time at the moment. By the time the detective gets out, she's only got 10 minutes to rush to Toys R Us before it closes. Thankfully, the Tamagotchi display is right by the front entrance, almost totally sold out, but with one lone box left, she snatches it up and cheerfully takes it to the cash register. As she walks out of the store and looks down at the box in her hands, she can't help but wonder, why the hell would her boyfriend want to play with a little children's toy? As soon as the detective opens the door to her apartment, she is struck by a change. Instead of sitting on the couch watching TV, her boyfriend is in the kitchen, radio belting out at full volume. Her heart flutters. Could it be? Has he heard back from one of his jobs? He sticks a head out from around the kitchen door and grins at her, beckoning her inside. She grins back, quickly hiding the Toys R Us bag behind her back. It smells amazing in here. Onions and garlic, oregano, rich tomatoes, a hint of wine in the sauce. He's really gone all out, making her favorite chili for dinner tonight. He waves her over to the pan and motions for her to take a deep smell. She does, enjoying all of the aromas filling the air. There's something smoky in there too, a new smell she doesn't recognize. She turns to her boyfriend quizzically. He grins and explains to her in sign language that it's charred peppers, held over the flames on the hob just long enough to blacken and then thrown into the food processor to... Hang on, she interrupts him. We don't have a food processor. Her boyfriend grins proudly and steps to one side to reveal a brand new shining food processor sitting proudly on their countertop. He explains to her that he bought it that day. It has 10 speed settings, multiple blades you can switch out, a miniature container for spice blends, and... She stops him again. How much did this cost? He looks sheepish. A wave of realization crosses his eyes, and he looks back at it guiltily. I just really wanted it, he signs. Thought it would make a nice romantic dinner for us. The detective softens. Of course, he was just trying to make the effort for her. It wasn't fair of her to tell him off for doing that. Opening the Toys R Us bag, she pulls out the Tamagotchi and holds it out to him. Compared to this expensive food processor, her gift looks pretty insignificant, but her boyfriend's face lights up straight away. He grabs it off her and rips the toy out of the packaging in a frenzy. His eyes shine and dance around as he hatches his first Tamagotchi. He looks like a child on Christmas Day. She can't help but join in laughing with him as they go to sit on the couch and watch some TV together. But the next day, when the detective gets home, she notices a hole in their wall. A literal hole. Their landline is missing. Her boyfriend's face pops out from around the corner, just as it did the previous day, with that same grin. Only this time, he's brandishing a brand new cell phone in his outstretched arm.
It's tiny, about the size of a brick, with the name Nokia emblazoned across the top. That can't have been cheap. This time, she doesn't share in his excitement. Indeed, the next day, she can't even muster up a smile when he proudly demonstrates the alarm on his new G-Shock, laced up his new Jordans, and started excitedly flipping through his box set of R.L. Stine books. That is enough. She can't deal with this anymore. She's been struggling so hard to make ends meet. Meanwhile, he's throwing away hundreds of dollars on products he had never mentioned before. She snaps. It can be very frustrating being mute because you can't shout to let your anger out. All that energy instead goes into her sign language, her hands swinging and slapping into each other as her face contorts. What's wrong with him? Why is he being like this? She's doing everything she can to keep a roof over their heads, while he's just throwing all of her money down the drain. How could he be so cruel? The more she rants, the more guilty her boyfriend's face becomes. Tears fill his eyes, his bottom lip starts to tremble, and before long, he's bawling in front of her. Can't keep going, not seeing him like this. Her hands fall limply to her sides. After a moment, he raises a sniffling face to her and signs something simple back. It's the TV. The commercials, they're just too persuasive. She snorts a laugh, and that's it. If he's not going to give her a serious answer, she's not going to have a serious conversation. She storms off up to bed, leaving him alone downstairs. He switches the TV off. That next day, she wakes up to breakfast and bed, but no sign of her boyfriend. She doesn't touch any of it, getting a coffee and croissant on her way into work instead from this up-and-coming coffee place called Starbucks. Today is a chance for her to take her mind off things. She's at a crime scene in a poor neighborhood. The previous night, the man who lived there had been sitting downstairs with his blinds open out to the street. He'd noticed a suspicious figure walking past who'd peered in through the glass. Before he knew what was happening, a brick crashed through his window, and the burglar was in his home, running from room to room, ransacking the place and trying to make off with different items from the house. The homeowner had run to his gun safe and shot the burglar in the back 4 times. The crime scene investigation was mostly a formality, but as the detective arrived, one of the officers came over to her. He didn't know sign language, so the pair of them wrote down their conversation on her detective's notepad. Yes, she carries a notepad, some stereotypes are true. The officer has a hunch, and a good one. The burglar broke into the house knowing full well the homeowner was watching him, a highly risky thing to do. But what was most peculiar was the list of items that the burglar had been trying to steal. The officer shows her the list, and her jaw drops. G-Shock watch, food processor, Nike Air Jordans, R.L. Stine books, a Tamagotchi. An officer across the room remarks that these are all really high-demand items at the moment. His own wife and kids have been pleading for some of these for weeks. The crime scene photographer agrees. It all gets written on the notepad so that the detective can follow the conversation. What was this man's employment status? She asks. Unemployed. She looks around the room. There's not much in the way of furniture here, just a couch pointing at a big TV. The detective drives home right away, to the surprise of her boyfriend. He gets up from the couch and comes to see her right away. He's dressed much better, a white shirt on. He's tidied the house. The TV is off. He goes to start apologizing as soon as she walks in, but she brushes it aside, signing urgently to him. I need you to tell me everything about what you've been watching on TV. Confused, he runs through his list of regular shows that he's been watching. Buffy, Quantum Leap, The Fresh Prince, Friends, of course. She shushes him. What about commercials? All the things you've bought recently. Talk to me about those commercials. He looks stumped. They're just normal TV commercials, nothing special or exciting. They're all different actors, messages, companies. It clicks in the detective's head. That's it. What about the voiceover? I don't know. It's a man, I think. Yeah, it might be the same man. You know what? I think it is. It's the same voice each time. And he only does those commercials? Her boyfriend thinks hard for a second. He nods. It takes a long time for the police to mobilize, as usual. The detective takes her findings to the commissioner at her first opportunity, but he looks pretty nonplussed. This spate of burglaries and muggings, all because of some persuasive voiceover actor? Really? Everyone wants a Tamagotchi. Everyone wants a pair of Jordans. These are just passing fads. That's all there is to it. So, she does it herself. The detective visits all of the advertising agencies that ran the local versions of the commercials she has listed, and finds the details for the voice actor on her 3rd try. He's in the same state, but another city. But by the time she gets an afternoon to drive out and pay him a visit, it's too late. The apartment she visits is empty. After banging on the door for several minutes, a neighbor sticks their head out of a window and yells something at her. The detective can't understand, however, so the woman comes downstairs and writes a grumpy note.
He's dead, yacht accident or something. Only she can't spell yacht properly. The detective pushes open her apartment door dejectedly. All that effort, all that chasing, for nothing. It wasn't so much about trying to solve the burglaries. Those were just things being taken. It was about understanding what had happened to the love of her life, her kind, caring boyfriend, the man who'd brought her so much joy, who had always been so considerate and gentle with her, suddenly going on a spending spree and almost bankrupting her. It just hurt too much. And now, coming back to her apartment and having to face up to that tense relationship just felt... Arms wrap around her and hold her tight. Her boyfriend's hand brushes the back of her hair, and the smell of his cologne fills her nose. After a moment, her arms wrap around him. After another moment, they both start to cry together. He leads her into the kitchen, where he's cooked her favorite chili again, only without the smoky smell. She looks around the kitchen. The food processor is gone. He pulls away from her and explains that everything is gone. All of his bad purchases he'd made have been returned. He hands her the cash for them in full. He still wants those items. He wants them more than anything else, he explains. But more than any of those things, he wants her. The TV is gone too. So as they sit down that evening together, they just enjoy doing nothing together for a bit, catching each other's eyes over dinner and smiling uncontrollably before getting out a sheet of paper and writing another job application. There's something about this application, the detective thinks. This one could just be the one. Ask anyone about the 90s, and they'll have more fads to tell you about than historical events. Furbies, Beanie Babies, gel pens, Napster, the list goes on. But for residents in a certain part of the USA, some of these trends seem to touch more obsessive. And that is all down to the actions, or rather, the voice, of one man, SCP-661, the world's best salesman. We didn't get to meet SCP-661 today, so allow me to introduce him to you. The salesman is a middle-aged Caucasian male. He is somewhat overweight, but with no major health issues aside from what is typical for someone of his age and size. If you were to have a conversation with SCP-661, and I advise you not to, you would find him rude, abrasive, and tiresome. He has a short temper and makes regular demands. You would quickly find that he is very much used to having his own way, and for good reason. For you see, this salesman is persuasive. Very persuasive. Foundation testing has found that this SCP is capable of extreme manipulation, verbally persuading you to want what he tells you to want, virtually instantaneously. It sounds dramatic in those words, but the effect is far more subtle than you may realize, which is the reason why he was able to operate for a while before being discovered by the Foundation. Test subjects report the effects of his persuasion as feeling like a continuous, low-level compulsion, a desire bubbling away underneath the surface until they encounter an opportunity to act on it. At this point, it becomes an all-consuming obsession, not satiated until you have fulfilled the urge. The effect is strongest with physical objects, which is likely why this salesman enjoyed so much success providing voiceovers for local marketing campaigns. Any product that he was selling would fly off the shelves anywhere where the commercial featuring his voice were aired. Perhaps those crazes in the 90s weren't so innocent after all. Testing on the salesman has proved enlightening. D-Class personnel were ordered to physically assault him, but he was able to stop the attack almost immediately by simply explaining to them that they didn't want to hurt him. However, test subjects who were threatened with execution if they stopped attacking him were able to continue to beat the salesman up for several minutes before the researchers decided he'd had enough. Though, notably, they made it abundantly clear the entire way through the assault that they didn't really want to hurt him. SCP-661 naturally poses some level of threat to the general public, as his abilities could easily be used for far more nefarious purposes than selling a few more troll dolls, and so guards have permission to terminate him in the event of his escape. That seems unlikely. SCP-661 is held in a standard holding cell measuring 6 meters by 8 meters. Any researchers interacting with him must wear noise-canceling ear protection at all times, unless they are deemed to be totally deaf by SCP medical staff. Incidentally, it was the work of the detective you heard about today that drew the Foundation's attention to SCP-661. Unaffected by his commercial work, she was in the perfect position to connect the dots and uncover his existence. With operatives through law enforcement, the Foundation was quick to catch on to her theory and apprehend him before word traveled too far. That yacht accident story was enough to keep the public from ever discovering his existence. That said, you should still be careful out there. Who knows if another instance of this SCP exists somewhere? Have you ever seen a commercial too tempting to ignore? Watched a YouTube ad that you decided not to skip? No? Me neither. But still, Be careful.
The retirement facility was always lively in the mornings. Breakfast was served promptly at 7, and the dining room would fill with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of utensils, and the occasional burst of laughter. At the heart of it all was the old man, a favorite among the residents and staff alike. He had a routine that everyone admired. Each morning, without fail, he would pluck a flower from the facility's garden, a single daisy or rose depending on the season, and bring it to a widow who sat quietly by the window. She rarely spoke, her dementia clouding most of her days, but her face would light up when he gently placed the flower in her hand.
Another beautiful bloom for a beautiful lady,
He'd say with a wink, his voice warm. The widow would smile, sometimes with tears in her eyes, as though a fleeting memory of something lost had returned. The old man's presence was like that, lifting the spirits of everyone around him. When the widow sat alone at her table that morning, the absence of a flower was immediately noticed.
Strange,
One nurse muttered as she refilled coffee cups.
he's never missed a day.
The widow stared at the empty spot on her table where the flower would usually sit. For a moment, her hands trembled, as if grasping at something intangible. Her expression was sharper than usual, her lips moving soundlessly.
He's probably just running late.
Another staff member reassured, though a note of unease lingered in their voice. The minutes stretched. Breakfast came and went, but there was no sign of the old man. By mid-morning, concern turned to action. One of the nurses decided to check his room. She knocked twice before opening the door, her cheerful greeting faltering in her throat as she stepped inside. The curtains were drawn, casting the room in shadow. The old man sat in his chair by the window, his back turned to her. He was trembling, a faint, jerky motion that seemed to ripple unnaturally through his shoulders.
Are you all right?
She asked, stepping closer. He didn't respond. She hesitated when she saw the floor beneath his chair. It was wet, not with water, but with something viscous and red. Her breath hitched as she moved around to face him. His mouth was open, the corners stretched unnaturally wide. Where his teeth should have been, there was only raw, glistening muscle, pulsating faintly as though it were alive. His once warm, tan skin had taken on a deep crimson hue, almost glowing in the dim light.
Call an ambulance!
She shouted, her voice cracking as she backed away. As she fumbled for her radio, the old man suddenly rose, his movements unnatural and erratic. His arms jerked like a marionette's, his head tilting sharply to one side, as though something unseen was pulling him.
Sir, please sit down,
she pleaded, though fear made her voice quaver. He didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he staggered toward the window, his fingers pressing against the glass with surprising force. The nurse reached out instinctively, her hand brushing his arm. His skin was hot, almost feverish, and she recoiled. Before she could react, he hurled himself against the window. The glass cracked but didn't shatter. Again, he slammed into it, the jerking motions of his body now frantic.
Help!
The nurse screamed, but her voice barely carried over the chaos of the moment. The window gave way on the third strike, shards of glass exploding outward as the old man tumbled through. He hit the garden below with a sickening, wet thud, his body twisting grotesquely upon impact. Staff swarmed the garden, but it was too late. The old man's body lay motionless, his crimson skin stark against the green grass. The facility manager called the authorities, speaking in hushed, clipped tones as the staff tried to usher the other residents away from the scene. Whispers spread among the nurses and aides, their concern quickly turning to fear.
What happened to him?
One whispered. Another shook her head, her expression grim.
It's not just him. There was something wrong. Something inhuman.
That evening, the nurse who had found him finished her shift in a daze. The image of his crimson skin and jerking movements replayed in her mind over and over, haunting her even as she walked through her front door. The single mother of 3 greeted her children. She forced a smile, hugging them tightly, and moved through the motions of normalcy, preparing dinner, overseeing homework, and tucking them into bed. Yet even as she tucked the youngest beneath his quilt and kissed his forehead, her thoughts lingered on the old man's contorted body and the way his skin seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the dim light. By the time the house fell silent, her exhaustion caught up to her. Heading to the bathroom for a moment of quiet, she reached for her toothbrush, hoping the routine would steady her nerves. But as she brushed, something felt off. Her mouth ached, a dull throb growing sharper with each stroke. Pulling the toothbrush from her mouth, she noticed streaks of blood coated the bristles. She leaned closer to the mirror, her brow furrowing as she examined her teeth. At first, they looked intact, but something wasn't right. The edges of her teeth seemed softer, almost pliable. She pressed a fingertip to one and felt it give, like raw muscle. A sharp pain lanced through her jaw, and she gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her reflection stared back at her, her lips trembling, her breath shallow. When she opened her mouth to scream, no sound came out. A wave of panic washed over her. Just then, her youngest child wandered into the bathroom, tugging at her robe.
Mommy, my mouth hurts.
He whined, his small voice filled with discomfort. Her fear deepened, but she managed to force her expression into something resembling calm. She crouched down, pressing trembling hands against his cheeks as she examined his mouth.
Let's get you back to bed,
she murmured, her words muffled and garbled, the distortion from her altered mouth making her speech almost unrecognizable. He stared at her, confusion etched on his brow, but allowed her to lead him back to his room. She tucked him in, smoothing his hair as she whispered a promise to take him to the dentist the next day, for both of them. Back in her own bed, the nurse's skin began to feel unnaturally warm. Her joints stiffened, resisting even the smallest movements. A sharp pain radiated through her jaw, spreading downward in waves. She whispered into the suffocating darkness, her breath ragged.
What's happening to me?
As the question lingered in the air, her bedroom door creaked open. Her second eldest, a little girl, burst into the room, her voice high-pitched with fear.
Mommy, something's wrong with my teeth.
The nurse sat up, her movements sluggish and jerky, as though her body was fighting her every command. Her daughter stood in the doorway, clutching her stuffed bear, her small frame trembling.
Come here,
the nurse said, or tried to. The words came out warped, barely audible through her transforming mouth. The little girl hesitated, her wide eyes flickering to her mother's face.
Mommy, you look weird.
Panic surged through the nurse. She reached out a hand, but her arm spasmed uncontrollably.
It's okay, sweetheart,
she managed to croak, though even she didn't believe it. The girl shuffled forward, reluctant but seeking comfort. When she climbed onto the bed, the nurse gently cupped her chin, tilting her face upward. The sight sent ice through her veins. Her daughter's gums were swollen, the once white teeth beneath visibly softening, taking on a reddish hue. The girl whimpered as the nurse pressed a trembling thumb to her molars, which gave way with an unnatural pliability.
It hurts,
the child whispered, her voice trembling. The nurse swallowed hard, forcing down the rising tide of despair.
We'll get help,
she said, her words slurred and thick. The girl nodded, her trust unwavering despite her fear. The nurse hugged her close, stroking her hair as tears streamed down her face, mixing with the beads of sweat forming on her now reddening skin. A sudden crash from the hallway jolted her. She stiffened, her breath catching as she strained to listen. Another crash followed, louder this time, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet.
Stay here,
she rasped, guiding her daughter under the covers.
Don't move, no matter what you hear.
The girl clutched her bear tightly, her wide eyes brimming with tears, but she nodded. The nurse stood, her legs stiff and reluctant to obey. Each step toward the door was a battle against her own body, her muscles jerking unnaturally. In the hallway, the shadows seemed darker, the air heavier. Her youngest son's voice echoed faintly from his room.
Mommy?
He called out, his tone tinged with confusion and fear. Her heart pounded as she turned toward his door, her trembling hand reaching for the knob.
Mommy, my mouth!
His words were cut off by a sharp, wet sound, followed by silence. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, the door creaked open, and her son stepped into the hallway. He was crimson, His small body jerked and twitched, his head tilting unnaturally as he stared at her with unseeing eyes. Her knees buckled as she stumbled backward, the reality of what she was witnessing crashing down on her.
No!
She whispered, her voice breaking. The boy took another step forward, his movements stiff and mechanical. Behind him, more shuffling sounds emerged from the darkness of his room. The nurse staggered back into her bedroom, slamming the door shut and pressing her body against it. Her daughter's frightened sobs came from under the covers, muffled but heart-wrenching. She slid to the floor, her body convulsing as the changes overtook her entirely. Her skin burned as it turned a vivid crimson, and her jaw locked in place, silencing the scream that built in her chest. By the time the first rays of dawn seeped through the blinds, the house was silent. The next morning, the retirement facility was unusually quiet. The usual routine, the clatter of breakfast trays, the shuffle of walkers, and the hum of soft conversation, was muted. The events of the previous day hung heavy in the air, the old man's absence now an unspoken weight shared by all. Staff moved cautiously, avoiding eye contact with one another. The widow, usually seated by the window with her flower, was not there.
I'll check her room,
a nurse whispered to another, nodding toward the window.
Do it quickly,
came the reply.
Something about today feels wrong.
The nurse turned and headed for the hallway, but she didn't make it far. Halfway to the widow's room, she froze. The faint sound of something scraping against a hard surface caught her attention. It was rhythmic and deliberate, like nails dragged softly across tiles.
Hello?
She called out, her voice faltering as she turned the corner. The hallway stretched out, lined with rooms. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then she noticed the door to the old man's room. It was ajar, though it had been locked the day before. She stepped closer, her pulse quickening. The scraping sound grew louder, interspersed with faint, jerky thuds. Pushing the door open, she gasped. The widow stood in the center of the room. Her skin, once pale and papery, had flushed a deep crimson. Her fingers twitched erratically, clawing at the desk as if searching for something unseen. The last flower she received was clutched tightly in her hand, its petals crushed and bleeding red sap onto the floor.
Ma'am, are you all right?
The nurse asked, taking a cautious step forward. The widow turned slowly, her movements unnatural. Her lips parted, revealing a horrifying sight. Her teeth had completely dissolved, replaced by pulsating red muscle. The nurse recoiled as the widow took a staggering step toward her, her arms jerking as though yanked by invisible strings. The nurse fled, shouting for help. Staff members rushed to the scene, but chaos quickly followed. The widow's jerky movements grew frantic as more residents emerged from their rooms, some drawn by the noise, others displaying the same crimson transformation. In minutes, the place was in total chaos. Nurses and aides rushed from room to room, trying to hold back the residents, but it was no use. They were overwhelmed by the residents' unnatural strength. One orderly was thrown against the wall with a sickening crunch, his arm hanging limp as the crimson-skinned residents turned their attention elsewhere.
Lock the doors,
someone shouted.
Get everyone who's normal to safety.
The unaffected residents at the retirement facility huddled together in the dining room, their wide eyes filled with terror as the staff attempted to secure the building. Outside, the transformed individuals were relentless. They pounded on the locked doors, their fists leaving smears of blood and saliva on the glass. The noise echoed through the halls, a grotesque symphony of desperation and fury. But far from the chaos at the facility, in the quiet of her small home, the nurse who had discovered the old man's body the previous day was facing her own nightmare. She stood in the bathroom, gripping the edges of the sink, her knuckles white as she stared into the cracked mirror. Her gums throbbed with a dull, relentless ache, and her teeth, once sturdy and familiar, now felt foreign, soft and malleable under her tongue. She bit down lightly, only to feel her teeth compress like overripe fruit. Panic surged as she opened her mouth, leaning in closer to the mirror. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat, but no sound emerged. Her jaw convulsed violently, her head snapping back involuntarily, as an unnatural grinding noise filled her ears. It was mechanical and rhythmic, like machinery roaring to life deep within her skull. From the living room, her children's voices called faintly, their words blending into the cacophony in her head. She stumbled out of the bathroom, her movements erratic and jerky, as if her body no longer fully obeyed her. When she entered the living room, she froze. Her youngest son was clutching his face, tears streaming down his cheeks.
Mommy?
He whimpered, his voice muffled. His gums were swollen, his teeth visibly softening into the unmistakable texture of muscle. Her eldest daughter was crouched in the corner, her skin already a vivid crimson. She rocked back and forth, clutching her knees as her jaw trembled uncontrollably, her head jerking at unnatural angles. The middle child stood stiffly, his arms twitching as his movements became increasingly puppet-like. The nurse's own body spasmed violently, her muscles locking and releasing in unpredictable patterns. She tried to speak, to call out to her children, but all that escaped was a strangled, guttural sound. Her youngest reached out to her, his small, crimson-stained fingers trembling. Her daughter turned sharply, her body twisting unnaturally as she moved toward the door. One by one, the children began to shuffle forward, their jerky steps mirroring the nurse's own. As though responding to an unseen signal, the family moved as one, staggering out the front door into the cool air. The street beyond was eerily silent, but not empty. Other figures emerged from nearby houses, their movements identical, stiff, erratic, and eerily synchronized. Men, women, and children of all ages moved in the same disjointed, puppet-like manner, their crimson skin glowing faintly under the morning sun. They were all infected with the anomaly that would come to be known as SCP-6093. The infected people, known as SCP-6093-1, moved with purpose, their jerky steps propelling them toward the outskirts of town. They seemed drawn to the same destination, as if pulled by an invisible force. They converged on the open highway, joining others who had also succumbed to the transformation. Together, they marched toward the horizon, a silent, grotesque procession that grew larger with every mile. By the time the crowd reached the Chihuahuan Desert, it numbered in the thousands. They moved as one, their bodies trembling with the same eerie rhythm. Then, the first clusters began to form. Men, women, and children, all pressed together in grotesque harmony. Their crimson skin glistened under the scorching sun as their bodies contorted, merging with those around them. By nightfall, the first of the monoliths had emerged. Rectangular and pulsing with a life of its own, the structure, designated SCP-6093-2, stood as a grim testament to the anomaly's reach. Similar structures began to appear in the Thar Desert of India and the Kalahari Desert of Botswana, each one larger and more imposing than the last. The hum of these monoliths was low and resonant, sending ripples through the air and ground. As Foundation reconnaissance teams approached, the structures began to emit a series of sounds, distorted, rhythmic, and almost childlike. Analysts quickly identified the noises as a crude form of communication. Translated by the Department of Extra-Dimensional Linguistics, the message was simple yet chilling. "Mommy, my mouth hurts." In the Foundation's global command centers, the weight of the situation was becoming unbearable. The monoliths weren't merely stationary anomalies. They seemed to possess intent.
They're not just forming structures,
A senior researcher muttered during an emergency briefing.
they're sending a message. It's asking for help.
The room fell silent, the implications heavy. The afflicted weren't just victims of an anomaly. They were part of something far larger, something alive.
What do we do with that?
An agent asked bitterly.
Offer them therapy?
The reply from the director was grim.
We burn them.
He stated firmly. Task forces were deployed to the deserts with strict orders: contain and destroy. Flame units were prepared to reduce the monoliths to ash, regardless of the strange pleading sounds they emitted. The first monolith in the Chihuahuan Desert collapsed under the intense heat of industrial incinerators. The pulsating, flesh-like material burned quickly, releasing an acrid smoke that filled the air, thick and suffocating.
God, that smell.
One observer muttered, pulling his scarf tighter over his face. Another, clutching a handheld scanner, watched intently as the structure writhed in its final moments.
It's reacting to the heat, like it's alive,
she murmured, her voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. As the flames licked higher, the surrounding SCP-6093-1 instances began to convulse violently. Their crimson bodies spasmed as though struck by an invisible force, collapsing one by one into the sand.
Are they dying?
Someone asked, a younger agent whose trembling voice betrayed their unease.
No,
the lead scientist replied grimly, watching as one SCP-6093-1 instance twitched its head unnaturally before crumpling.
They're connected. The monolith is their core. Take it down, and they go with it.
Another figure stepped forward, a grizzled operative whose gaze never left the burning monolith.
If that's true, then why does it feel like we're being watched?
Silence fell over the group as they turned their eyes to the remaining SCP-6093-1 instances still standing at the far edges of the field. Though they had not yet collapsed, their heads jerked toward the observers in unison, their hollow gazes fixed and unnerving.
Keep burning,
the lead scientist said sharply, breaking the stillness.
We can't let up now. Finish it.
In the Thar and Kalahari deserts, similar operations were underway. The monoliths resisted, their undulating forms pulsating with renewed vigor, as if fighting back against their destruction. But the Foundation's firepower proved overwhelming, and the grotesque structures were eventually reduced to smoldering ruins. The air was heavy with ash and the stench of charred flesh, but the threat of SCP-6093-2 had been temporarily neutralized. Despite the successful destruction of the monoliths, the anomaly persisted. New cases of SCP-6093 appeared daily, far exceeding the Foundation's capacity to respond. The condition's method of transmission remained a mystery. Neither direct contact nor environmental factors seemed to account for its rapid spread. Cities worldwide saw outbreaks that defied containment. Entire neighborhoods transformed overnight as afflicted individuals gathered in silent processions, drawn to unknown destinations. The Crimson Tide grew unstoppable. Amidst the chaos, the Foundation initially declared Biological Containment Area 07 as a facility to transfer all discovered instances of SCP-6093. But it quickly became a grim symbol of the anomaly's escalation, officially tasked with housing and studying SCP-6093-1 instances. The site reported a breach during an experimental attempt to deconstruct one of the afflicted. Within hours, personnel began exhibiting symptoms. Their teeth dissolved into muscle tissue, and their skin flushed crimson as they succumbed to the transformation. The infected staff gathered in the site's central courtyard, their bodies pressing together in a sickening, synchronized dance. By dawn, a new monolith stood where the containment site had once been, its pulsations visible from miles away. The Foundation officially declared Biological Containment Area 07 lost, and SCP-6093 became designated as a SCOTOS containment class. The monoliths continued to emerge, their pulsating hum disrupted seismic equipment and communications, their resonance spreading further each day. The monolith's intent remained a mystery, but the Foundation knew one truth: they were losing. In the final days of the year, the anomaly's impact was undeniable. The anomaly had spread to every continent, with quarantine zones failing as quickly as they were established. In one remote village, a young boy watched from his window as his mother joined the crimson-skinned masses marching down the dirt road. His tiny hand pressed against the glass, and his voice trembled.
"Mama, don't go,"
he whispered, but the figures marched on. Hospitals worldwide reported a sharp rise in admissions for mouth-related issues, the early signs of infection becoming horrifyingly routine. The Foundation scrambled to intercept cases before they progressed, deploying advanced AIC systems to monitor symptoms. Individuals identified as infected were transported covertly to Foundation hospitals, where infected tissue and bone were surgically removed, incinerated, and the patients sent back into society with fabricated stories of oral cancer. But as the number of cases rose, it became clear that containment was no longer sufficient. The revised special containment procedures reflected the desperation of the Foundation's efforts. All individuals who had undergone surgery for SCP-6093 infection are to be located and terminated, their remains incinerated. Foundation personnel are required to undergo daily oral examinations. Those infected are to be immediately euthanized, their bodies destroyed to prevent further spread. Every instance of SCP-6093-1 is to be incinerated upon discovery, whether contained or uncontained. Above all, the formation of SCP-6093-2 monoliths is to be avoided at all costs. In the wake of Incident 6093-034, the Foundation confirmed the number of SCP-6093 cases has surged to over 2.5 million. Current projections paint an even grimmer picture: over 10 million cases by the start of next year. The anomaly is not slowing, it's accelerating.
The researcher knows they're risking their career at the SCP Foundation, putting their very reputation in jeopardy. But they can't deny their obsession. The creatures are fascinating, an anomalous insect species with a highly unique pattern of creating habitats inside human beings. The researcher has sidestepped the official approval process, using falsified requisition paperwork to gain access to their new subject in a solitary testing chamber. Everything is off the books, and for months, the insects have been toiling away, making themselves a new home. As they open the secure cell, they know the security officer they paid off will wipe the records of their keycard being used. The researcher steps inside and examines their new hive like a child with an ant farm. The skeleton is withered, misshapen beyond all recognition. Skin has wasted away to the consistency of tissue paper. The researcher wants to see just how much damage has been done. Peering into the gap where the skull used to be, it's immediately clear, even to the naked eye, that a significant portion of the subject's brain is missing. Tens of thousands of insects swarm within the cavity. They have to eat something after all. The portions of the brain that have been left intact are, the researcher has figured out, responsible for regulating the hive's functions. Every twitch could be the few organs left moving inside, or the insect scurrying around. The researcher wouldn't admit it to anyone, but he adores his hive. Getting to examine one this close is something that no other anomalous expert at the Foundation has ever managed to accomplish. It makes it worth the risk. Examining the hive, the researcher notes down any recognizable changes in its state. The decay and deterioration has been going on for months now, so long that day to day there doesn't appear to be much difference. That being said, the host still has their eyes intact, and those are yet another food source for the creatures nesting inside. The researcher gently lifts the eyelids, careful not to tear the delicate skin, and shines a flashlight into the unblinking pupils, expecting nothing but lifeless glass. But then, the shock hits. The eyes move. They're following the light. With a scream, the researcher drops the flashlight and rushes out of the testing chamber. They feel sick, alarmed, distressed. They thought the insects only nested in the dead. They had no idea that the hive was still alive. Given the anomalous nature of this insect species and its more concerning behavioral characteristics, several Foundation researchers examining their behavior have taken to referring to them as the Bone Hive. The Foundation's leading experts in the field of anomalous entomology were initially tasked with performing a full study into possible origins of the species, classified as SCP-439 following their discovery. The Foundation's findings have indicated a potential connection between the bone hive and Forficula auricularia, otherwise known as the common earwig. However, the exact nature of the presumed connection between the earwig and SCP-439 was somewhat difficult to ascertain, with some skeptical that they are even connected at all. Some researchers within the entomology department became convinced that SCP-439 was a previously undiscovered subspecies of Forficula auricularia. It possesses some similar physical traits, such as the flattened, elongated body shape and slender antennae often associated with earwigs, as well as the characteristic pincers at the tip of the abdomen. Their shared physical similarities begin to differ with their coloration. While most earwigs possess a reddish-brown tint, SCP-439 has more of a gray, semi-translucent color to its external skeleton. It measures 2.5 centimeters in length, which seems to be fairly standard for its non-anomalous counterparts. However, not everyone agrees. Several anomalous entomologists have pointed out that SCP-439's behavior is vastly different from that of the common earwig. In their view, the differences are so extreme that any biological relationship between the two is virtually impossible. Forficula auricularia are nocturnal, typically scavenging dead plant and animal matter, then hiding under stones or inside rotten logs during daylight hours. They are considered a common household pest to humans, usually invading any small, dark crevices within homes that might be damp enough to lay eggs. Earwigs feed on organic matter, meaning when infesting human homes, they can often consume food that is stored in kitchen cupboards and pantries. Their colloquial nomenclature of earwigs, from the Old English ear beetle, is attributed to the appearance of their hind legs, as these resemble human ears when unfolded. But there is a popular misconception that these invertebrates climb into human ears whilst a host is asleep, with some stories even suggesting that they lay eggs within human bodies. While this is patently untrue and not how Forficula auricularia reproduces, the same cannot be said for SCP-439. When encountered in a safe environment, SCP-439 is relatively safe for humans to interact with. Much like an earwig, if the insect feels threatened, it will use its abdominal pincers to give someone a firm, painful pinch. However, it is believed that these forceps are more to ward off any potential predators than specifically evolved to cause humans harm. This does not mean that SCP-439 poses no danger to human beings, though. In fact, the opposite is true. One of the largest, if not the largest, difference between SCP-439 and Forficula auricularia is the methods it deploys for constructing a habitat for itself, and how it then reproduces. This is also the largest factor of the anomalous insect's behavior that presents a significant risk to human beings, because SCP-439 uses them as hosts. This was observed firsthand when SCP Foundation researchers initiated an experiment wherein a member of D-Class personnel, referred to as Test Host 1, was instructed to spend 24 hours in a controlled testing environment. The only other inhabitant in the room was SCP-439, though this information was withheld from Test Host 1. Prior to this experiment taking place, other life forms were left alone in the vicinity of SCP-439. Although the insect appeared to show little interest or awareness towards anything other than humans, all other creatures were uniformly rejected. It was only when a researcher, who will remain nameless to spare them embarrassment, noticed SCP-439 displaying significant interest towards them during an examination. The researcher was noticeably exhausted, struggling to keep awake, and this seemed to attract SCP-439. This was the catalyst for the experiment. Test Host 1 was permitted to freely inhabit the testing space and told that they would need to spend the night sleeping in the same room. After around 6 hours, during which proclamations of boredom were made a staggering 1,194 times, Test Host 1 was encouraged to sleep. Laying themselves down on a bunk that had been provided, they soon drifted into unconsciousness, and it was at this point that SCP-439 appeared to display the same interest in the D-Class test subject. Observing through the intense magnification of surveillance cameras within the testing chamber, anomalous entomology researchers noticed that, while Test Host 1 was awake, the insect had been hiding in a corner of the room, seemingly waiting for an opportune moment. It managed to remain undetected until the test subject fell asleep, though exactly how it was able to determine the D-Class personnel member was, in fact, asleep, is unknown. It was at this point, though, that SCP-439 approached the bunk where Test Host 1 was dozing, crawling up the legs and over the blankets, before climbing into the test subject's mouth. Surveillance equipment in the room was immediately switched to display an X-ray look at the interior of Test Host 1's body. Researchers spotted SCP-439 traversing its way down the D-Class member's trachea, before eventually arriving within one of their lungs. Once here, the insect appeared to situate itself within the lung, using it as a habitat. Observation of Test Host 1 continued, with the subject awakening suddenly around 4 hours later, noticeably in some degree of distress. When questioned about this, the D-Class complained of intense chest pains, as well as showing significant shortness of breath. As they became increasingly frantic, they accused the researchers of administering some unknown substance while they had slept. At this point in the experiment, Foundation wellness handlers were dispatched to the control environment to try and calm the test subject and administer a sedative. However, before an attempt could be made to subdue test host 1, they doubled over in severe pain, complaining of excruciating abdominal cramping. They were still struggling to breathe, with the tightness in their chest increasing. An alarm was sounded and an emergency medical code issued for on-site medical staff who were instructed to resuscitate test host 1 without causing any harm to the SCP-439 specimen currently nested in their lung. By the time emergency medical staff arrived, they noted that the subject had a rapidly climbing fever and was struggling to move, eventually becoming incapacitated entirely. Pulse checks confirmed that they were still alive, and medics were instructed to back away from the D-class and allow the observation to continue. Though what occurred next was pretty hard to miss. Estimated to have occurred somewhere between 4 to 8 hours after SCP-439 entered the lung, test host 1's incapacitated body began convulsing violently. They began suffering the rapid onset of a condition that closely resembled fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, a normally genetic disorder that promotes the overgrowth of bones, often causing them to grow into muscle tissue. Their body began quickly developing new bones, these protrusions occurring so fast that they quickly began to pierce their way through muscle, flesh, and skin. The process was evidently even more painful, with the D-class test subject screaming as several bone spurs began to protrude outwards from underneath their flesh. Despite their attempts to treat the resultant injuries, emergency medical personnel were unable to stop the copious bleeding. Their efforts were further hindered by the movement of test host 1, as the subject in question appeared to regain some semblance of consciousness, evading the aid of Foundation medics and attempting to hide under the bunk. It was later determined by anomalous entomology experts that something about the process compelled them to seek out shelter, drawn to the nearest darkened, enclosed space that they could find. Some have suggested that if test host 1's alteration by SCP-439 had occurred, say within a house, that they might have been drawn towards cabinets, closets, and heating ductwork. Petitions were made by the research teams observing test host 1 to continue the experiment without treatment in case of further development in the subject's condition. Despite a staunch opposition from the Foundation's ever-redundant ethics committee, continuation of the experiment was granted, and test host 1 was left untreated for 3 whole days. 2 days into the continuation, researchers requested that audio surveillance feeds of the testing chamber be cut, as they grew uncomfortable listening to the D-class subject's screams of pain. By the 3rd day, the test subject was immobilized, thanks in no small part to the excruciating pain of the new bones growing, coupled with their difficulty breathing. It was at this point that the subject entered what the research team considered the final stage of transformation. Concealed in its new home under the bed, the affected subject slowly huddled into a fetal position, and as observed by X-ray scans, their skeletal structure continued to undergo anomalous changes. Entire portions of test host 1's skeleton began shifting inside them. While this was occurring internally, externally, the rest of their body was shriveling, shrinking down to around 3/4 of its original size. This continued until the host body was almost completely spherical in shape, though new bone protrusions continued to grow after the cessation of regular life signs. These newer protrusions seemed to anchor the host body in place, keeping it permanently in its new location. At this point, permission to conduct a close examination of test host 1 was approved. Several of the research team entered the testing chamber wearing protective coverings over their faces and hands. The skeletal structure that had once been a living member of D-Class had been rendered unrecognizable, converted into what some of the research team described as a cage. It was difficult to ascertain exactly how much internal damage had been caused by SCP-439, though close scans seemed to indicate that several of test host 1's internal organs remained functional, albeit in a limited capacity. This discovery sparked an ongoing internal investigation by the SCP Foundation Ethics Committee regarding the potential harm of allowing experimentation with SCP-439 to be performed on future human hosts. The main point of argument the committee has posed is that, while they may not be conscious, there are those who have debated that hosts could still be considered alive at this point in the process. Whether this constitutes grounds to halt experimentation on human test subjects is a matter that is still yet to be resolved. Monitoring of the newly formed bone hive continued, as spectral analysis revealed movement was occurring within the host long after its external movements had ceased. This wasn't the movement solely of internal organs, but of the colony that was now using the body of test host 1 as a home. The specimen of SCP-439 that had initially been allowed to nest inside of the D-class test subject's lung had since become a queen, producing between 20 to 30,000 offspring. Initially, exactly how this had occurred was unknown. No mating process of SCP-439 was ever observed, leading Foundation researchers to the hasty conclusion that the insects must have reproduced asexually. These offspring of the original queen seem to match the behavior exhibited by workers, drones, and warriors, distinguished by their large, powerful abdominal forceps. These specimens seem to match the typical roles found in other non-anomalous insect colonies, conforming to an insect hierarchy that was typical of most hive-based creatures. Of all the specimens now active within the remains of test host 1, only the queen appeared to be capable of reproducing. For a time, quarantine procedures were considered, as well as total incineration of the bone hive by mobile task force operatives using flamethrowers, in order to prevent a possible infestation. However, once it was confirmed that none of the other specimens posed a significant risk, these safety measures were rescinded. Research teams were flabbergasted by the state of the interior of what had previously been test host 1. The structure within was virtually unrecognizable as a human body, with various internal organs having been removed and seemingly destroyed. However, the lack of waste or residual tissue seemed to indicate that these organs had been consumed by the members of the SCP-439 hive and used as a food source. Other organs had been modified by the workers to be repurposed as incubation chambers for the eggs laid by the insect's queen. Most notably, anomalous entomology experts observed what they considered to be an indigenous behavioral trait that appeared to be unique to SCP-439 specimens. These anomalous earwigs appeared to use the digestive system of their host's body to process organic materials that warriors collected and deposited into the host's stomach. The colony will then manipulate the upper and lower intestines of their host, breaking down the organic matter into a slurry of nutrients. This is then used as food for the insects, and additionally allows the host structure to be sustained without succumbing entirely to total collapse. The state that hosts are kept in was described by one Foundation entomologist as a waking death. Colonies of SCP-439 cannot exist in perpetuity, however. In fact, their primary biological function appears to be to continue harvesting organ matter from their host until the colony produces a new queen. This occurred within 6 months of the initial implantation of SCP-439 into test host 1, though it's estimated that a new queen can be born in as few as 4 months in other cases. Once this new queen has emerged from within the colony's ranks, it will select a drone to mate with. This process completely derailed the Foundation entomologists' prior train of thought. They had previously believed SCP-439 to be capable of asexual reproduction. It appeared that the prior specimen had been impregnated with the necessary offspring to start a new colony at some point prior to being discovered by the Foundation. Once the new replacement queen is inseminated, the work of the existing colony ends. The specimens of SCP-439 will destroy themselves by rupturing the redacted within the host's body, ensuring the majority of the insects are killed while the new queen is protected. Workers and drones are unable to survive outside of the host, while warriors will abandon the hive to die having completed their tasks. These insects cannot consume any organic matter apart from the NutraHive slurry produced by the colony, so they will inevitably die once departing their hive of origin. The sole survivor, the newly formed replacement queen, will then exit the bone hive, fertilized and ready to locate a new human being to serve as the host for the next colony. It appears that these SCP-439 queens are able to stay fertilized in near perpetuity until they have entered a new host, though they cannot implant themselves within any mammals other than humans. The now vacant host of the previous colony will cease any residual life signs following the evacuation. A thorough post-mortem examination of the husk that used to be test host 1 revealed that the former test subject had not been killed by the mass trauma of several thousand insects burrowing out of them, but through starvation. Foundation experts in anomalous and altered human biology have posited the theory that the slurry produced by an SCP-439 provides just enough nutrients to keep their hosts on the verge of functionality. But after the evacuation, their bodies are no longer being sustained by this limited supply of cannibalized organic matter. Debate as to whether host bodies can be considered alive or not is still ongoing and unresolved. It is this process of utilizing human bodies as hosts for their hives that constitutes the key difference between SCP-439 and the common earwig. The severity of this difference has led to the belief that the two species only share a slight cosmetic resemblance, which some have chalked up to an evolutionary coincidence. Put simply, SCP-439's behavior is so unusual that it doesn't seem possible to many Foundation researchers that it could possibly be a distant relative of the common earwig. SCP-439 is to be kept at Armed Research Site 45 within the Hazardous Lifeforms Wing in a securely locked containment unit with a connected oxygen supply. Handling of the specimen is only permitted to personnel with Level 2 clearance or higher, and it is to be fed regularly through a feeding tube using only the approved nutritive substances. While the specimen currently being studied by the Foundation was recovered within mainland China, there have been no reported sightings of similar insects within the vicinity of the redacted province, nor anywhere else in the world. Currently, the only known specimen is the one found by the SCP Foundation. This has not ruled out the possibility of other colonies of SCP-439 existing elsewhere.